Mark Koch. I'm sitting here with Deb Brown. And I don't know if you guys picked up just recently, I added a new section to my monthly newsletters or supply chain tips. And Deb has been a long-term friend, and she's an ex-bond trader, and she has a tremendous knowledge of what happens in the markets and what happens in Wall Street. And I felt it was an opportunity to combine the financial background of her and my supply chain knowledge and pull them together and see if there's a good synergy for my readers, my clients, and see if they can use the brain power of both of us and transition or form their long-term strategy of their supply chain and their operations to take advantage of what's happening today and maybe what's happening in the next 90, 180 days, and how they can get ahead of the curve and beat the competition out of the gate. So recently, Deb and I co-authored, and it was mostly Debbie authoring the first one, and we're calling it the Market Report. And Debbie authored this on, and if I get the title exactly right, inflation, is it transitory or a long-term challenge? So I just wanted to ask Deb a quick introduction of who she is and her background. Could you give us 30 seconds of your elevator speech?
Hi, everyone. I'm Deb Brown. I was in the financial services industry for about 33 years, 20 years as a trader. And it's always been my passion to be on top of financial markets, examine financial data, and analyze economic data in my job every day, but also trying to figure out what that means for tomorrow, for next week, for next year. And I believe that by doing so, we can provide tools to help people make decisions, our clients to make decisions and strategies going forward.
Yeah, absolutely excellent. And what many of you don't know is Deb has been working with me for over about 2 years now, helping me in the background on doing some analytics, challenging what some of my thoughts are, and helping me think through some of the processes. And it's been a great relationship that we built up. Not only have we been friends, but we formed this alliance. So with that, Deb, in your article, when you sat back and we were talking about doing this, in the first article, we're seeing inflation in front of us. Can you kind of put us in the mindset of what was running through your mind as you were researching this and as you put this piece together?
Okay. Well, as we're going along here, we're seeing a big change with the COVID problem. You know, we're seeing wage inflation. We're seeing inflation in everything that we touch in our lives. And it's gone on, we've had a difficult year, and we're trying to figure out, is this going to be long-term or is it just short-term as supply chain gets back online, as the labor market straightens out? And we're finding a number of different conflicting arguments actually for whether inflation will continue or not. So we're examining that going forward.
So when you talk about the conflicting, you know, there's kind of, you know, we can go down a path A or a path B. And what are those two different paths? And because I know talking with you, you sit and say, I'm not exactly sure which way we're going to go. So talk about a path A or a path B that could happen.
Okay. With the Delta variant and the labor market specifically, we see the labor market improving. The numbers in June and July for job creation and unemployment are getting better. In June, for example, unemployment was 5.4. In July, it was 5.9 and 5.4 in June. That's a big change, okay? How long are these entitlements, these unemployment entitlements going to last? Many have already lapsed. Some are going to lapse in September. And from what I'm reading and hearing, there are people coming off the sidelines to fill some of these jobs, but there are still 5.7 million jobs that have not come back from before COVID, okay? And now how is this Delta variant going to pan out in terms of the economic recovery? Is it going to slow things down? with the mask mandates, with the vaccine requirements. I'm hearing that there are some shutdowns, but largely vaccines are required to work in many places, especially the federal government. Are we going to see travel slow down? I'm reading that there are cancellations right now. Yet when you go to the airport, you wouldn't think so. So how is it going to pan out for the labor market? How is it going to pan out for COVID? And how do these things factor into the inflation picture going forward?
Yeah. So Deb, you live in South Florida, just up the road from me. And I know right now you're in New York City, I think in Brooklyn, and
Yes.
you've done a little bit of traveling around in the past 48, 72 hours. What were the airports like on your way up to Brooklyn?
The airports, Fort Lauderdale was crazy. And I expect no less when I go back to Florida on Monday. As far as people being out and about, we went to a concert the other night, and I wouldn't say it was sold out. It was an outdoor concert up at Bethlehem Steel, which was a wonderful tour. And it wasn't full, but it had quite a bit of participation. I was surprised. So people are not, they're not scared everywhere in terms of COVID, even though we're reading about the spread and all the hype. I think going forward, the thing to do is separate the rhetoric from the facts, the hysteria from the facts. And that's a challenge.
Yep, exactly. So in getting back to inflation, one of the things that I don't know if I read it in the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times, but I think that when you take a look at the unemployment numbers or the vacant jobs and the unemployment numbers, they're exactly the same. So we could reach full employment if everybody got off unemployment, went into the jobs. But I know that's not exactly as easy as it sounds, because you have to have job skills match and location match. But I think you're exactly right with what you're saying, because in the short term, we needed to have these benefits to help everybody through the pandemic. However, they're lingering and they're keeping people on the sidelines. So as those evaporate, so to speak, people will come back into the workforce, but it's going to be a painful journey. All right. What are your give me 2-3 takeaways in 30 seconds from your article?
Okay. I think we need to be, as I said earlier, be looking at the labor market, what that means going forward. Is the Delta variant going to be a factor in keeping people from going back to work? Okay. The Delta variant itself, 90% of the COVID cases are Delta variant now. And we are seeing some reluctance to travel, some reluctance to go back to work. But how is that going to pan out? What is it going to look like in the next few weeks, months, and ahead for people going back to work, and for people feeling free to travel and to take up some of the services that they discontinued during COVID?
So do you think the biggest driver right now with inflation and in the market is the service industry? And once we get employment, because anywhere you go today, they say they're short help. Do you think that's the factor in services? And once we get past that, we will get over this inflation hump?
Well, that's actually, if think of it this way, though. Okay, yes, some of that will come back in balance, but once you have to incentivize people to come to work for you, signing bonuses or raises, if you have to raise people that you currently have as you hire new people and you have to pay them more, how permanent is that? Okay, and are we going to see it spike up again next year?
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to have to improve upon that?
Okay.
So how long is that going to last? What the Fed looks at is not price increases or wage hikes, but what happens in the next year? Does that then spike again?
All right. And when you take back and look at, say, the past 1 year with the Fed, how has that looked?
They have thrown stimulus into the economy hand over fist. And if you take that on top of what's happening fiscally in Washington, and the spending and the inflation, the infrastructure package, I mean, we keep hearing that there's other larger packages that have to come with it. That could push inflation for a while. We have to see how that pans out. The other thing is, the important thing for your clients is, how does this all affect supply chain? So I would put that to you. How would COVID, the labor markets, how is that going to affect supply chain going forward? And keeping in mind that the economy hasn't fully recovered from COVID to begin with.
Yeah. So are you're tired of me asking you questions and you're throwing it back to me?
Yes. No.
Grilling the daylights out of you?
That's your area of expertise, my friend.
I know I was grilling you pretty good. You're in the hot seat. So, sitting here and thinking about that, I kind of made a few notes, and I'm seeing within my current clients, when we talk about labor, let's talk about labor. In one of my clients, it's not necessarily the entry level jobs, but it is a job that is not quite entry level, but that's not all the way up the food chain, but in replenishment buyers. And what I've seen is a tremendous difficulty with some of my clients keeping some critical jobs in place. And people, they'll come in and they'll work for a week, 2 weeks, or 90 days, and they'll move on. And what has happened is there's been two fronts. One front is during COVID, people were afraid to switch jobs, even though they were dissatisfied with where they are at, even before it happened. And as it happened, they kind of held tight because they said they had a job, they have employment, they're going to keep put. So as soon as things started relaxing and it felt like we were seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and it wasn't a freight train coming at us, that people started jumping jobs. Then the other thing that's happened is when you start to fill them, people are getting in and they're saying, this isn't exactly for me, and they're jumping quicker. So that's a lot of pain. And the avenue that my clients have is, how much money do they throw at this, or exactly how should they play it? And what they're doing is trying to walk that fine line of not throwing too much money at it, but getting enough to attract and hopefully retain people. Then what's happening is when you throw in the disruptions that are continuing to happen within supply chain, you get a new person in the job, and these disruptions, it scares the daylights out of them, and they're frightened, and they kind of move faster than they probably would normally. It's just because there's so much change happening. So that's what's happening in the labor standpoint. One of the big elements that I'm starting to see, I've been hearing about it, but I'm having a couple clients ask about it recently, is international freight. And when the pandemic happened, I don't know if everybody remembers this, but a lot of carriers or shipping companies took old obsolete ships and they took them out of commission. All right. During the pandemic, our buying patterns switched. We're still buying things, but we're buying it from different products. And so we've had this surge in international freight. What we're seeing is I have a client that has had to turn away two $250,000 orders from their customers due to container freight cost. And what they're seeing is they're not a big operator. I have many clients that are, 1, 2, and a $27 billion corporation I work with. But I do have a few clients that aren't big players in the market, and they're not having a container a week or 2 containers a week. They have containers that are once a quarter. And a $250,000 order makes or breaks them for the year, and they cannot make money on it because the container cost was in excess of $20,000. So that's the real world that's happening out there, and many people can't do it. Is that long term? I can't believe that container costs are going to be $20,000 long term. Okay. I cannot see that, because literally 18 months ago, that same container was in the neighborhood of $2,200 to $2,500. All right. It's went up tenfold. So I can't see that happening long term, but it's going to be there for a while until we get through this. Then the other thing that I see happening is in organizations, you're having individuals that get tested positive for COVID, and that causes a huge disruption, not only within the inner working of the team. So how do you manage that and move forward? And that's a very difficult aspect, because you get the teams that they're starting to get traction. They feel like they're seeing this light at the end of the tunnel. Then all of a sudden, Johnny, Sally, Jose gets tested positive for COVID, and everybody has to go isolate in quarantine for 3 days or 7 days until they get negative test. So that is very difficult. So I threw a lot at you right there, but that's what I'm seeing happen at clients. And then just to add something, and I told Debbie not to ramble on, but here I am rambling on. So she asked me, what are some takeaways? What are some takeaways for people? I asked her the same question. I'm going to give you 3 or 4 takeaways. One of them is you have to start thinking about your total cost of ownership in a company. And this is something if you're a client of mine, you hear me talk about this regularly. And it's just not purchase price. It's just not raw material price. It's just not freight cost. You have to look at the cost of the entire enterprise. And you have to look at eliminating non-value added tasks where inventory sits, where we do rework, where we scrap, or key machines, key bottlenecks sit idle. Okay. That's not non-value added task. Then another thing is, many people are not familiar with say for instance, the London Metal Exchange, where they can hedge. It's a difficult task. It requires an economist on the team. And if you're a large enough enterprise, you can have an economist on the team, and you start tracking what's going on base materials and work to hedge those ahead of time. This is a time that this should be occurring. All right. And then let's see, what's the next, I'm going to give a part A and a part B. You need to have partnerships with your suppliers and long-term agreements. You just cannot be doing spot buys with them and paying a spot buy tax with suppliers. If you have a long-term agreement with them, you work in conjunction of reducing the total cost of ownership, and it's a partnership to where you're looking at bettering both yourself and themselves. And the part B of that is the same thing goes with customers. You need to be looking at your customers and building partnerships. So I know that's a lot in about 5 minutes, but those are really the key 3 things that you should be doing within your supply chain and your enterprise to hedge off inflation. All right. So with that, Deb, you got anything else for me?
I don't think so. I'm a little concerned about, you were talking about, you know, in work situations, COVID happening, and, you're talking about people getting COVID in work situations and so forth. And we have all these mask mandates now and vaccine mandates. And how bad is COVID going to be? Is it going to lead to shutdowns? I mean, so far in this country, it hasn't, but I'm hearing about in Asia, it's different. That, that COVID's spreading like wildfire, and factories are closing, and that's part of your supply chain. So
yeah, exactly. Well, that's been a big part of the disruption. Is it has there's kind of two, what I feel there's 2 swim lanes of disruption. One swim lane of the disruption is how our buying patterns changed. Pre-COVID, our buying patterns were very, very predictable. Okay, there's seasonality aspect, but people pretty much knew what we were going to buy. All of a sudden, COVID hit, and I'll get my hands up. Our buying patterns just did a throop, and they changed drastically. Okay, and that's left people scrambling to get caught up. You know, things that took off, and it's been documented, but all of a sudden, people wanted home exercise equipment, home weights. People wanted to buy bicycles to where they could go out riding bicycles, and there's long waits on that. Now, in jet skis, I live, on the intercoastal here in Miami, and before COVID, there was just a handful of jet skis. During COVID, jet skis were everywhere because it was something that was affordable, and personal watercraft all over the place. So that's part of the throop that happened. Now that we're coming out of it, people are out buying clothes now. People are out buying beauty products, and people are out looking to have fun and start dating. So
getting back out there.
Yeah, getting back out there. Exactly.
Yeah.
Then the other element that's causing the disruption, Debbie, is exactly what you're saying, is these pockets of shutdown where countries are having a region or an area with a high breakout of COVID, and they're shutting down a factory, shutting down a community, or shutting down a port because they want to isolate it. And that causes a disruption. So we got to work through that. And it all comes down, in my opinion, of we got to get vaccinated. And I don't know if not everybody's going to agree with that, but I do believe that we need to get vaccinated and put this behind us. The more of us that will be vaccinated, the faster this will go away. And so far, the vaccines are proving that they are safe, and there's not many side effects with it. The bigger side effect is not getting vaccinated and getting it. So that's what I see happening with supply chains, and we have a difficult time ahead of us for the next 18 months or so.
I would agree.
All right. You got any other questions for me? No?
No.
People get a hold of you if they wanted to get a hold of you.
What's
your email address for them to get a hold of you?
It's ddora at DDB Advisory Services.com.
Wonderful. So if you want to get a hold of Deb Brown, her email address is debdora.
Ddora. So DDORA.
Yep.
At ddbadvisoryservices.com.
Perfect. And everybody, if you want to get a hold of me, you know how to get a hold of me. Just reach out. And if you have any questions, drop me a note, and look forward to talking to you or hearing from you soon. Thanks a lot, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.